This is our brief introduction to Shakespeare, the man, the playwright. So, a little bit about his life and why is he so famous? Why is he so great? Shakespeare, and there's his dates 1564 to 1616, which was a pretty normal lifespan in those days. So, he was among the first of middle class writers from the middle class who had the opportunity to make it in his profession, to become rich and famous. He was not a lord, not from a rich family, not from a titled family, and this is really the first time in history here, the mid to late 1500s, first time in history that middle class people, first of all, there is a middle class, and middle class people actually have opportunities to move up in life. So he came from not a poor family, but not a rich family. Father was a lawyer and inherited some farms and was a glove maker. Other thing to know about his background is he was from a country family, not from London, where about half the population and all the influential, important people were based around London. So Shakespeare was from a small town called Stratford, about 90 miles north of London. And in those days, 90 miles is a long distance. So he had to move to London when he wanted to become a playwright. So a few other things about Shakespeare's life. He would have had a pretty good education, the best education you could get in a country town. Worked briefly as a tutor, a school teacher, and it's fun to speculate about some of these things. He was married at 18 to a woman 8 years older. So he's 18, and they had a baby just a few months after the marriage. So it's pretty obvious what happened. They had a little affair. They got together. Uh-oh, she's pregnant. Better get married. And so they got married. So the guy was 19 years old, and he was a dad. And then a few years later, they had other kids. I think they had twins a couple of years later. So married very young. Might have been an unhappy marriage because when he wanted to be a writer, he moved alone to London. There's no record of his family there. So he's alone in London, starts out trying to be an actor. Acting is a new profession at the time, but apparently was a poor actor or just couldn't get the opportunities, and continued to write. He wrote short poems called sonnets. I'm sure some of you know what sonnets are. Then began writing plays. Queen Elizabeth liked plays and had commissioned theaters in London. And we know that several of Shakespeare's early plays were performed there. So early plays, you've at least heard of these things: Comedy of Errors, Love's Labour's Lost, Romeo and Juliet, which is the one which hopefully you guys have read, a very readable early play. And then this one that we're reading for our class, Midsummer Night's Dream. They became successful pretty quickly. The early plays are more what we would call lyrical sounding and more rhyming. They're more rhymes and almost a song-like quality to the writing, and you'll definitely see that in Midsummer Night's Dream. The later plays, they tend to be longer and more kind of dramatic and serious. The famous tragedies were all later. Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, and Macbeth are all later in his career. Depending how you count, he has about 37 plays. Some we can tell were co-written by others, so there's a little debate, but that is a lot of plays, so he was a pretty prolific writer. And why is he so famous? Well, a number of things. So number one, let's start with the characters. Diverse and complex characters. So characters that are of different types of people, people from other countries, other religions, other races, and all this is pretty unusual back in the 1500s. And he clearly sympathizes with everyone. He never seems to write about himself. It's always about other people, and he sympathizes with everyone. The characters are also complex. No one is totally good, totally evil. You can understand people's motives. Some characters change. They learn things through the play, and we'll see that in Midsummer Night's Dream. And through them, we learn universal human truths, things about mankind. And yet, Shakespeare doesn't impose morals on us. You can see the themes being treated. Ambition is being treated in Macbeth, an example. Revenge and guilt is being treated in Hamlet. In Midsummer Night's Dream, love, and there are some sub-themes which we'll get to in another video. And these are things that we all deal with through life. All human beings deal with these things. Shakespeare gives us a way to understand these traits, these human issues. Other things. Shakespeare was famous for breaking the so-called unities as plays were written. Let me ramble about them just for a minute. This comes from the ancient Greeks. The Greeks thought that to have a successful play, you need three unities. Time, which is that the whole play takes place in one 24-hour period. Place, which means that it's one location. And action, which means there are no subplots. There's one main story and that's it. People followed these rules, or very closely, through Shakespeare's time. It was thought that you have to follow these rules, otherwise your play will fail, because the illusion will be broken. The audience is sitting there for a few hours maybe, and you could kind of stretch it that you're there for a day, but you know you're not there for more than a day. So they're afraid that if the story goes for more than a day, that it breaks the spell. And for location, well, you're just sitting in one place, watching the play. If you've read any Greek tragedies, people just come and go. They're standing in front of a building and they just come and go in front of one building. People thought, well, it'll break the spell because the audience knows that they're only sitting in one place. So your play will be ruined if you break that. And same thing with plot, that the audience only has so much attention that they can devote to the play. So if you have different subplots going on, then again, it'll break the spell and people will know that it's an illusion. So Shakespeare, little by little, started breaking these. Midsummer Night's Dream actually takes place in one day, so it has that, but there are many subplots and there are several locations in it, two main locations that are very different. So Shakespeare showed that it works anyway. You can break the unities and the audience still gets emotionally involved in the play. The play succeeds after all. Finally, Shakespeare is famous for his use of language, just the beautiful poetry, the figures of speech, especially metaphors, and we will point several of those out as we read Midsummer Night's Dream.